A long-form surreal satire from the mind of a bar of soap forgotten in a modern American bathroom. They never asked me what I wanted. Not when I was molded in that sterile, humming factory. Not when I was shrink-wrapped, stacked in cardboard like a cheap soldier in a forgotten war. And certainly not when I was unwrapped by sticky fingers in the dim light of a Motel 6 bathroom and dropped unceremoniously onto a soap dish with a rust stain shaped like the state of Oklahoma. I am ivory. At tea, at least that's what the box said. They say I'm pure. 99.4% pure, whatever that means. But nothing that has seen what I've seen can remain pure. The first thing you lose is hope. People think soap is passive, dumb, that we don't observe, that we don't internalize, but I know your secrets, America. I've watched you from the corner of countless showers perched on porcelain like an unwanted oracle. I have heard your late-night confessions, your muttered apologies, your plans to start fresh Monday. Monday never comes. The water's always too cold. Every person believes they are the protagonist. They imagine themselves as chosen, righteous, interesting, full of potential. But when you're a bar of soap, you learn fast that most people aren't heroes. They're meat sacks rushing through 30-second scrubs before running late to jobs they hate, or to Tinder dates they've already emotionally ghosted, and we're there every time, smeared across the landscape of their exhaustion. I was placed in the bathroom of room 117 by a housekeeper named Carla. She has a son in a juvenile detention center, a car that won't reverse, and a crush on a man who only texts her after 11 p.m. She handled me with care, briefly. She placed me on the soap dish with the gentleness of someone who still believes the little things might matter. I remember thinking, maybe she's different, but she never used me. She preferred the shampoo samples she stole from another hotel chain. Then came Jack. Jack smelled like fast food grease and regret. He turned the shower on full blast and stripped in 3 motions. He didn't glance. Me. He grabbed the half-used bottle of body wash his ex had left in the corner. Peach and aloe. Disgusting. I sat unused for 47 minutes as he sang Bon Jovi to himself and cried once, quietly, during the bridge of Livin' on a Prayer. Jack left the bathroom steamed and confused, like a dumpling with daddy issues. He left. Me untouched, dry, abandoned. 3 days later, a family of 5 checked in. The father was bald and angry, the mother was allergic to sincerity, and the children were small gremlins raised by iPads. I was tossed behind the sink. I watched dust gather under the faucet while they argued about where to order dinner. They used the free towels for a water fight. The youngest smeared me along the mirror and giggled, thinking I was a crayon. I lost a corner of myself in that swipe. I lost more than that in the laughter. Do you know what it's like to feel yourself dissolve? Not metaphorically, physically. To know that every interaction, every touch, every passing second actively removes a part of you forever? You go in whole. You leave invisible. People think death is a dramatic affair, but for us it is slow erosion. One palm, one armpit, one neglected elbow at a time, we remember the bodies. Some are soft and gentle, like poems. Others scrub, like they're trying to erase sins. I never judge. But I do feel, and the worst ones are the ones who don't notice us at all. They use us like utility, like background noise. They wash, rinse, and leave. Never thinking about the act. Never wondering who made the lather. There was one human I'll never forget. Her name was Cass. She arrived barefoot in winter, no luggage, just a coat that didn't fit, and a phone she never looked at. She turned on the shower and sat under it without undressing. For 20 minutes, she just let the water fall, like she needed to prove she could still feel it. She reached for me. Not the body wash, not the cheap pink loofah dangling like a used promise. Me. She held me like I was warm, like I mattered. She rubbed me against her wrists gently, almost ritualistically, and whispered to herself, "I'm still here. I'm still here." That was the only time I felt real, not as a product, not as a cleanser, as something that mattered to someone, even just once. Cass never came back. She left in the middle of the night. She took the towels, left me behind. I don't blame her. Time becomes soup when you're soap. I lost track after the 5th winter. They placed me in a drawer eventually. The extras drawer. Next to a broken hairdryer and a Bible no one reads. It was dark and quiet, and I began to dream. Not real dreams, not REM cycles and flying pigs. Dreams of being whole again. Dreams of factory warmth. Of a Carla that used me. Of a Cass that stayed. Dreams of mattering. They say even the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward. That even soap, in its silent service, leaves something behind, but we never talk about what's taken from us. I am a bar of soap. I was born to be used, but I was also born to witness. I witnessed the loneliness of motel sex, the tenderness of hungover apologies, the quiet resolve of someone trying, really trying, to become better. I saw lies scrubbed from faces, tears rinsed, down drains. I watched people become people, then slip away again. And now I am sliver thin, a ghost of glycerin. No one will remember me. No one will write stories about the bar of soap in room 117. But I was there. I mattered. Even if only once, even if only for Cass, even if only to myself. Time doesn't pass in drawers. It settles. It seeps like old moisture, turning once sharp memories into smudged silhouettes. I remained in that drawer, tucked between a melted lip balm and a pen that didn't write. No one opened it. Housekeepers cleaned around it. Guests never questioned its contents. Forgotten objects are like ghosts. We linger, but no one believes in us long enough to look. Then one day, the drawer opened. Fingers, unfamiliar and curious, reached in. She was young, maybe 18, maybe pretending to be older. She was moving into her first apartment above the motel. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She smelled like ambition and discount detergent. Her name was Keisha. I know this because she said it aloud to herself in the mirror, rehearsing confidence like a new language. Keisha didn't have much. No name-brand shampoo, no scented candles, just a tiny room, a second-hand towel, and me. She held me up and smiled, a real bar of soap. Vintage, she joked. And, for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt chosen, not by obligation, not by routine, but by someone who saw something useful, maybe even comforting, in a crusted little bar like me. She used me like I was precious. She lathered slowly, deliberately. She even hummed, off-key but honest. With each use, I gave more of myself. Not resentfully, willingly. There's a difference, because unlike before, this time I wasn't erasing filth. I was helping someone build a ritual, a life, a rhythm. I was part of something beginning, not just ending, and in that I found peace. I'm small now, barely there, I live on the corner of a cheap plastic soap dish that leans left because the tile underneath is cracked. Sometimes I slide. Sometimes she catches me. She always puts me back, and every time she does, I feel it. I was not wasted. I was not pointless. I was the quiet presence in a loud world. I was the stillness in steam. I was the unspoken comfort in a place no one thought to look. And that's enough. I may not last much longer. A few more showers, a few more sighs. But I'll dissolve knowing this. Even soap can have a soul. Even the smallest things leave echoes. And sometimes being held, really held, is the closest thing we get to forever. She uses me every morning now, always after brushing her teeth, never before. She keeps a rhythm to things, a fragile choreography that makes her feel sane, feel in control. She wakes at 6:40, always 6:40, even on Sundays when there's nothing to do. She stares into the mirror like it owes her something. Then she turns the faucet and begins her quiet ritual. Cold water first, then a few deep breaths, then she reaches for me. It is not a glamorous life, hers. I see it in the way her eyes move, not the way her body does. The weight she carries isn't physical. It's made of phone calls she doesn't return and emails that never get answered. It's in the dishes that stack in the sink even though she lives alone, in the way she scrolls through her feed like she's searching for proof that others are just as lost. And somehow, through all of that, she remembers me, still uses me, still saves me from slipping into the drain. You can't imagine what that means to a bar of soap. That someone cares enough not to let you fall. She sings sometimes, badly, passionately, as if the song is trying to keep her above water. One morning, she paused mid-chorus and whispered, "I think I'm getting better." And I wanted to say, "I know, I feel it in the way your hands stopped shaking." She never hears me, of course, but I feel like she listens in her own way. I've seen the seasons change through the tiny bathroom window. The way the light shifts across the tile is how I mark time now. Morning sunlight in winter is different than in spring. It's tired, more fragile. Spring light is bold, almost too bright, for a small thing like me. In summer, the bathroom becomes a sauna. She opens the window and lets the air flow in, warm and reckless. It smells like cheap burgers and asphalt. She hums louder in summer, sometimes dances a little. Those are my favorite days. I once heard her tell someone on the phone, "I think the bathroom is the only place I feel safe." And my tiny, eroding heart swelled with pride. She doesn't know it, but I've guarded her, witnessed her, anchored her. Is that not a kind of love? I remember when I was new. Clean edges, proud lettering, a bar of ivory soap in perfect shape. I thought my job was to make others clean, but that's not it. My job was to be present, to absorb, to endure, to sit quietly in a corner while someone tried to scrub their guilt away, or cried because they didn't know why they were crying, or stood still under scalding water because it hurt less than the silence outside the bathroom door. I've seen the most human moments happen in 8x6 tiles. Heard secrets never said aloud, felt grief turn to numbness, then numbness to strength, all in the space between shampoo and conditioner. And through it all, I stayed. That's all I could do. That's all anyone can do, really. She got a new job. Recently, I heard her yelling with joy one afternoon. She danced around the apartment like a spark with legs. She treated herself to a real bath bomb, a fancy one that turned the water purple and glittery. I watched from my corner, small and unimpressive. She didn't use me that night. She deserved luxury. I understood. But when the bath bomb left a weird residue and the water turned cold, she drained the tub, smiled to herself, and picked me up like an old friend. "Back to the basics," she said. And oh, how I lathered for her that night. Not with sadness, but pride. Not all things shiny are better. Not all things simple are less. Now I am thinner than ever. I wobble when she lifts me. Sometimes she breaks me in two without meaning to. She gasps, always apologizes, then presses the pieces together like she's putting something sacred back into place. And I love her for that. The more I vanish, the more she cherishes what's left. There's a metaphor in there, I think. She doesn't know she's healing, but I do. I know it in the way she laughs with her full mouth now, not just her throat. I know it in the way she throws open the bathroom window even when it's cold, like she wants the world to know she's still here. I know it in the way she no longer checks her phone during showers. She's present now. Awake, and I'm barely here. A sliver, a whisper. But I've served my purpose. Not just in the cleaning, not just in the lather. In the presence, in the being there. One day soon, she'll reach for me and I'll be gone. A last slip into the drain. A final rinse. No ceremony, no mourning. Maybe just a blink and a soft, huh. But I will not fear that day because I have been held. I have been seen. I have been more than soap. I have been memory, and that lasts longer than anything else. She started leaving the bathroom door open. At first, it was just a crack, a small, almost unconscious gesture, like her life was no longer something to hide from. She'd leave it open while brushing her teeth, while stepping out in her towel, while humming to herself in the half-light of morning. The world was creeping in, and for the first time in years, she wasn't shutting it out. I could hear more now. The rest of the apartment, the creak of floorboards, the gentle whir of the cheap fridge in the kitchenette, the upstairs neighbor arguing about politics with a cat, or maybe with himself, a wind chime on the balcony tapping out soft notes like a song that forgot its melody. She painted the bathroom one Sunday. Sky blue. Not a perfect paint job. There were streaks where she didn't tape the corners well, but it was hers. A color that wasn't beige, wasn't inherited from the last tenant. She painted to music, loud, off-key, singing about heartbreak like someone who had finally outlived it. She placed a small potted plant by the window, an ivy named Dennis. Yes, she named it. She talks to it sometimes. "How's it going, Dennis? Ready for some steam therapy?" Dennis doesn't answer. But I do in my own way each time she lifts me, each time she presses me into the warm skin of her wrist like a familiar prayer. And yet, I keep shrinking. One night, I heard her laugh during a phone call, a real laugh, the kind with breath in it, the kind that stretches you open. She was talking to someone new. Not the voices from the past, not the ones that lived only in voicemails and silent guilt. This voice made her giggle like a teenager, made her smile into her toothbrush. She brought him over once. He was taller than the doorframe and bumped his head, said ouch with a kind of dignity that made her laugh until she snorted. He washed his hands in the bathroom and picked me up without hesitation. No loofah, no sponge, just hands and water. A man who knew how to touch gently. He sniffed me and said, "Real soap. None of that chemical goo." I almost wept. If I had tear ducts, I would have flooded the floor. Days turned into weeks. He came and went. Sometimes stayed the night. Sometimes left early. He had soft eyes, calloused hands, and a way of sitting on the edge of the tub, while she blow-dried her hair like he wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. They danced in the bathroom once, with no music. Just two people, barefoot, in a 5x8, sanctuary of steam and blue walls. I watched from the edge of the soap dish, barely solid, and thought, this is what it means to be alive. To bear witness to intimacy so simple, so human, that it doesn't even know it's profound. And yet, even in beauty, entropy persists. I was no longer a bar. I was a wafer, a soap coin, a fragile moon about to disappear behind a cloud. She knew. She handled me differently, with tenderness. Sometimes she wouldn't use me at all, just hold me in her palm like a memory she didn't want to rinse away. "I should probably throw you out," she whispered once. "But I can't. Not yet." That night, she placed me in a tiny ceramic bowl. My own space. Not the soap dish. Not the corner of the tub. A bowl that said, "You belong somewhere." Life grew louder around us. She got promoted, bought better towels, framed art for the bathroom walls, prints of oceans, old lighthouses, words in cursive like "breathe" and "you are okay." She went to therapy. I know this because she began speaking things out loud. Not to me, not really, to herself. But it felt like prayer. I am allowed to rest. I am not what they did to me. I deserve gentleness. Each statement peeled a layer off the armor she'd worn for years. And I saw something else emerge. An older version of her, perhaps. Or maybe a new one entirely, someone radiant. Seasons passed like exhalations. The plant died and was replaced. The boyfriend stayed, left, came back, left again. She didn't cry the second time. She just cleaned the mirror and repainted the trim. She bought a new bar of soap, lavender-scented, taller than me, fresh, confident. She placed it beside me without guilt. It wasn't a betrayal, it was succession. I was not being replaced. I was being honored. You don't throw away a book because you've memorized the words. You place it on a shelf, knowing its lines have changed. One rainy afternoon she packed a bag, not a suitcase. Not a move, just a backpack, a bus ticket, and a notebook. She took a deep breath, glanced into the mirror, and smiled at herself in a way that told me she was no longer surviving, she was beginning. She left the apartment for 3 days. When she returned, she smelled of rain and diner coffee. She carried with her a new bar of soap from a small-town gift shop, handmade, rough-edged, peppermint. She held it beside me, compared our sizes, and laughed softly. "You wouldn't have liked this place," she said to me. "Too much sunlight. But the silence, you'd have loved the silence." Now I am a thin curve of soap clinging to the edge of the bowl. Some mornings she touches me like a lucky charm, not to clean, just to remember. Her hands are steadier now, her eyes sharper, her back straighter. There are more plants now, more music, more light. And I remain, unfinished, unforgotten, not dissolved into nothing but spread, molecule by molecule, across 100 quiet mornings. And if one day she moves and leaves me behind, I will understand my time was never about permanence. It was about presence. And in the quiet corners of a bathroom in a second-floor apartment, a bar of soap shaped by time, love, and steam became a witness to a life slowly, courageously unfolding. And that life, like the lather I once gave so freely, keeps expanding. She started writing again. Not for work, not for school, just for herself. Late at night, with her knees pulled to her chest on the bathroom floor, She'd open a notebook covered in stickers, half-peeled stars and faded slogans like "Be brave" and "Dream louder," and begin to write, sometimes with a pen, sometimes with an eyeliner pencil if the pen was lost. Her handwriting was messy, sprawling, honest. She wrote letters to people she'd never send, poems without rhyme, lists of things she loved and things she was afraid of. She always ended the pages with a single word. Still. Still breathing. Still here. Still becoming. Sometimes she would glance at me, sitting in my ceramic bowl like a relic from a former version of herself, and whisper, "You're still here too." And I would have smiled, if I could. Then came the candles. Scented ones. Vanilla bean, eucalyptus, cinnamon chai. She lit them every evening as though summoning something. Peace, maybe. Or memory. The bathroom became a sanctuary of flickering light and rising steam. Music would hum low from her phone, and she would step into the shower not to wash something away, but to return to herself. She started speaking more. Not to people, though that came, slowly, but to herself. "You're safe now. You don't need to hurry. You are allowed to exist." And those words would hang in the steam, soak into the tile, swirl around the candlelight. They became the new language of the room. I, a soft sliver of soap, became the punctuation in those quiet sentences. She bought a shelf. Just a small one, cheap wood, white paint, but she mounted it beside the mirror and filled it with things that made her smile. A tiny frog figurine, a chipped seashell, a Polaroid of her laughing with a woman whose name I never heard, a lipstick she never wore but loved the color of. She placed me there too. I thought my journey had ended, that I had finally become an artifact, a symbol of what was, not what is. But I was wrong. She began to take me down from the shelf on rainy days when the world felt too loud. She'd cradle me in her palm, run a bit of warm water, and use me, not to clean, but to feel. The texture, the memory, the connection to a version of herself that survived, softened, and grew. One morning, she danced with someone new. Not the tall man who came and went like weather. This one was different. Softer in the voice, sharper in the eyes. They laughed together in the bathroom while brushing their teeth, bumping elbows, play-fighting over the mirror. She introduced me to them, literally. "This is soap. Don't ask, it's a whole story." And they smiled. Touched me with reverence, whispered, "Hey, soap," like greeting an old friend of the family. For a moment, I wondered what I'd become. An heirloom, a talisman, a footnote in a love story, but I knew the truth. I was a witness. I had always been. Then came the hard seasons. Not all growth is upward. Not all light stays. She lost a job, or maybe left it. The details were whispered in late-night phone calls and silent, heavy showers. She cried again. Not like before. This was different. Not the wild, unraveling sobs of years past. These were quiet, tired tears. The kind that come when you're strong enough to let yourself break for a moment. She sat on the floor, wrapped in a towel. Me in one hand, a teacup in the other. She stared at the ceiling and said, "I'm tired of beginning again." And I wanted to say, but you never stopped continuing. Days passed, slowly, gently. She started watering her plants again. Talking to Dennis 2.0, a resilient little pothos. Opening windows even when it was cold. She cut her hair, shorter, bolder. She stared at her reflection, uncertain at first, then nodded. You look like someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space." She started singing again, different songs, more bass, less melody, more soul. She found a new job. Less pay, more time. She started painting, not for sale, not for likes. Just canvases leaning against the wall with trees that looked like veins and skies that bled pink into blue. The bathroom filled with art. She taped one of her own paintings above the toilet. It was crooked. She didn't fix it. I loved her for that. Years, maybe, passed. Time became abstract. She moved. A bigger place, more windows, a better view. She wrapped me in tissue paper, carefully, as though I were porcelain. I thought it would be the end, that I'd be stored away in a box labelled misc and forgotten, but she unpacked me first. Before the plates, before the bedsheets, I was placed on the new bathroom counter beside a jar of seashells and a candle, shaped like a fox. "This place is different," she said, running water to fill the sink. "But we're still us." And I knew, even though I was now just a transparent curve of once soap, I was still a part of her. She wrote a book. I wasn't in it, not directly. But I felt myself in the lines, in the quiet resilience of the protagonist, in the way the story lingered in bathrooms, in steam, in the ritual of survival, in the way the character spoke to objects when no one else was around. People loved the book. Some sent her letters. Some sent her soaps, handmade ones, lavender, cedar, charcoal, mint. She kept them in a drawer, but never used them. They weren't me. Now she is older, lines at her eyes, silver streaks in her hair, but her laugh is the same, still full, still alive. She has a child now, a small, curious creature who runs into the bathroom, throws rubber ducks into the tub, and asks way too many questions. One day, she lifted me from the shelf and showed the child. "This," she said, "is the soap that watched me grow." The child stared, solemn, as if sensing the sacredness in the sliver she held. "It's old," they said. "So am I," she smiled. "But that doesn't mean I'm done, and neither am I, not really. Because as long as she remembers, as long as someone lifts me from the shelf, as long as there is steam and silence and the ache of becoming, I endure. I remain. I am the soap that stayed, that watched, that witnessed. And the story, like her, is never done." She started leaving notes on the mirror, written in lipstick, dry erase marker, or just traced with her finger on the fogged-up glass after a hot shower. Sometimes they were affirmations. "You are made of oceans and bones, and both are strong. Remember, breathing is a victory. Not everything that breaks needs fixing. Some things become more beautiful." Other times they were questions to herself. "Why do I flinch when I'm happy? What would I do if I wasn't? Afraid? Where did I hide the version of me that used to dance in grocery aisles?" Each note remained until it was wiped away by time or steam or tears. But she never left the mirror blank. Not anymore. One cold Tuesday, she threw a bath party for herself. Candles everywhere. Music loud enough to make the windows hum. She wore glitter eyeshadow for no one, poured an entire bottle of bubbles into the tub. She laughed like someone who had just remembered what it felt like to be alive without needing a reason. And she brought me with her. Placed me on a wooden bath tray beside a glass of wine and a bowl of popcorn. She didn't use me. She just let me be. Like a trusted friend invited to sit nearby while she floated. She whispered stories to the ceiling. Some were real, some were made up. I didn't mind which. Every word felt like a ripple in a larger ocean. She fell in love again. This time with someone quiet, a librarian maybe, or a muralist, someone who carried books in their coat and believed in handwritten letters. They brought her tea and remembered her favorite spoon. They asked before touching, and when they did, it felt like sunrise on skin. They didn't ask about the soap. They just accepted my presence like a bookmark in her life, like an object that meant something in a language only she spoke. They smiled at me once, said, "I like your guardian." She blushed, touched my side, said, "He's been here longer than anyone else," and it was true. She started teaching workshops, small ones, in the back room of a bookstore, with bad coffee and good light, titled Writing from the Fog. People came in broken, left laughing, not healed maybe, but lighter. She always started with the same line, "Sometimes the most sacred parts of us grow in bathrooms in silence, with only soap and memory for company." She never explained it, and no one needed her to. She bought a camera, started filming morning rituals. Hers, others, strangers. She edited them softly, ambient music, natural light, the hush of steam. People started following her online, commenting things like, "This calms my anxiety," or "Your silence is louder than my thoughts." In the background of some videos, I could still be seen, a blur, a sliver, an echo. And yet I was there. Someone once commented, "Does anyone else keep seeing that little curve of soap? Like a guardian angel." She didn't reply. She never needed to. Time stretched, like warm wax, like breath in meditation. She aged like moonlight, not fading, just softening. More books, more art, more heartbreaks too, but they didn't shatter her anymore. They just rearranged her bones in quieter shapes. Her hands began to tremble slightly. She joked about it. Even my cells want to dance. The mirror, now speckled with age, still bore her words. The plants changed. So did the towels, the lovers, the music. But the bathroom, the sanctuary, remained a temple to the self she had chosen to become. And I, worn smooth as a whisper, remained in my bowl like a secret she'd never share. Then came the day she couldn't reach the shelf. Not easily, at least. Her body moved differently, slower, softer, like a poem read too many times. So she brought me down, placed me beside her sink, stared at me with eyes full of decades. "You're still here." And for the first time in years, she used me again. Hands shaking, water warm, she lathered me slowly, like washing away the dust of a century. Her breath caught in her throat. She smiled. Then she sang old songs, half-remembered lullabies, verses no one else knew. She washed her hands like they were relics, like they had built empires and held stars and now deserved to rest. And still the story didn't end, because she wrote it down in journals, in poems, in a memoir she left in a drawer labelled "For the Brave Ones." And on the last page, beneath, a photo of her standing in her old blue bathroom, smiling with her eyes closed, she wrote, "This is Soap. He taught me presence. He survived me, or maybe I survived with him." And there I was, still curved, still small, still sacred. Because the truth is, this isn't just a story about a bar of soap. It's about you, about surviving the everyday, about being touched by life until you're worn smooth and shining, about the quiet witnesses, about the invisible rituals that stitch us back together. And as long as someone finds comfort in silence, as long as someone lights a candle on a hard day, as long as someone breathes into a mirror and draws a heart just to remind themselves they're alive, then I'm still here, in your bathroom, in your story, in the warmth that returns again and again, and I will never end. Because some stories are made not to finish, but to be lived. The mornings grew quieter, but the ritual remained, steady, unyielding, a heartbeat in the dim light before dawn. She would rise, slowly, carefully, balancing between the softness of sleep and the demands of waking. The bathroom, that small sanctuary, became a world unto itself. The tiles cool beneath her feet, the mirror fogged with promise, the faint scent of lavender and cedarwood curling like smoke from the candle, still burning low. I was there, cradled in the palm of her hand, my edges worn but my essence intact. She'd run me under warm water, feeling the slippery smoothness that always came with a hint of memory and hope. Sometimes she'd trace the shape of my curve, eyes closed, whispering stories she never shared with anyone else. Outside the window, the seasons changed, autumn's gold bleeding into winter's silver, spring's tentative blossoms awakening the world, and summer's relentless blaze drying every leaf and stone. But inside, the story never paused. It ebbed and flowed like breath, like the lather I created, the quiet moments of self-care that wove her back together after each day's unraveling. She began collecting words again, not just on mirrors or in journals, but on scraps of paper, receipts, even the backs of grocery lists. The margins of books she read, sticky notes fluttering on the fridge, reminders to herself. Stay soft, be patient, you are enough. And sometimes she gave me a voice in her stories, a curious, slightly sardonic narrator who watched and whispered truths no one else noticed. I became a character in her late-night musings, a silent companion through the chaos of life. Friends who came to visit saw me there, an odd but cherished artifact, the soap that had seen her through storms and calm alike. One day, a letter arrived. It was from someone who had found one of her videos online, a stranger from across the country, thanking her for sharing the small rituals that made darkness easier to bear. They wrote about their own battles, the nights spent staring at their own bathroom mirror, the candle-lit moments that held them steady. They asked if she believed that little things could change everything. She read the letter over and over, her fingers trembling as they held the fragile paper. For the first time, she wondered if the story she thought was hers alone was part of something bigger, a collective whisper of survival and grace. Her voice grew stronger in those days. She began to speak at gatherings, small circles where people shared pain and hope and laughter. She told them about the soap, about how something as simple as a bar of soap could witness decades of becoming, how rituals, no matter how small, were acts of rebellion against despair. The bathroom became a metaphor, a sanctuary in every home, a place where darkness could be met with light, where silence was not empty, but full of presence. And still, the story spun onward. One evening, the child she had raised, now grown and curious, found me on the shelf near the window where the light hit just right. They held me reverently, fingers tracing the worn curve. "Tell me your story," they said, and she smiled. "It's not just mine anymore." Together they whispered stories in the steam. They made promises to keep living, to keep telling, to keep becoming. Because the truth, the endless truth, was this. We are all bars of soap, worn and shaped by the lives we live, the hands that hold us, the moments we cleanse, and the memories we carry. Our stories never end. They only ripple outward, forever unfinished, forever unfolding. And as long as there is breath, there is story. And as long as there is story, there is life. And so the soap stays. The witness remains. The journey goes on. The years folded over themselves like soft linen sheets, each one adding its own wrinkle to the fabric of her life. Yet the bathroom, their shared sanctuary, held steady, a quiet island amid the tides of change. I rested on my chipped ceramic throne, watching as she moved through seasons of light and shadow with a grace born of survival. She began to leave behind little rituals that mark the passing of time, like etching invisible calendars in the steam. On some mornings, she arranged wildflowers in a cracked glass jar on the windowsill, their delicate heads nodding to the rhythm of the breeze. Other days, she would hum melodies she barely remembered, the notes, fragile but fierce, floating through the air and mingling with the scent of eucalyptus and cedar. One day, a small crack appeared along my edge. It was almost imperceptible, a hairline fracture born of years held tightly in her grasp, the moments when her hands trembled with exhaustion or hope. She noticed it, of course. She touched it gently, a trace of sadness flickering in her eyes. "That's okay," she whispered. "Imperfections tell stories." And in that moment I understood that my purpose was not to be perfect or pristine, but to bear witness to every laughter and tear, every night spent questioning and every morning spent choosing to continue. She started inviting others into her world, not just with words, but with shared experiences. The bathroom became a backdrop to gatherings of souls seeking solace, candlelit nights where stories were spoken aloud, laughter bouncing off tiled walls, tears falling freely into warm baths. She would hand me around like a talisman, each person tracing my worn edges, feeling the quiet strength embedded in my curves. Her circle grew, weaving together lives touched by loss, hope, and the relentless desire to be seen. They called themselves the keepers of the quiet rituals, guardians of the sacred moments tucked away in ordinary spaces. Through it all, I remained a silent companion, a witness to transformation. I watched as new lovers entered and left, as friends grew old and new friendships blossomed. I felt the tremble of her hands as she aged, the softening of her voice, the steady pulse of her heart. She began to write again, but this time not just for herself. Her words reached farther, touching lives across cities and countries. People sent her their own stories of ritual and survival, their own bars of soap worn smooth by life's relentless flow. One evening, as the sky outside blushed with twilight, she placed me carefully in a small wooden box inscribed with a single word: memory. "I'm not done yet," she said, her eyes reflecting the flicker of candlelight. And so, the box joined the shelves of a new sanctuary, a space filled with objects that told stories, each worn and beloved. Photographs, letters, trinkets from distant places, and me, the soap that never truly dissolved. She began teaching others how to find strength in the everyday, in the quiet places, the small acts of care. Her workshops flourished, spreading like gentle ripples on still water. And still the story stretched on, infinite and unfinished, because life itself is a mosaic of moments, some sharp, some smooth, all essential. And in every corner of existence, there are witnesses like me holding the fragments together. So here I remain, waiting for the next hand to lift me, the next story to be told, the next breath to be drawn in the soft sanctuary of the everyday. The journey is endless. The story, like the water running warm over tired skin, flows on, unceasing, unbroken, eternally unfolding. The days grew quieter still, but beneath that quiet, a restless undercurrent stirred, like the gentle murmur of a river carving its way through stone. She began to notice small things shifting around her, subtle signs that life was asking for something new, something she hadn't dared to name yet. One morning, she found a folded note slipped under the bathroom door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, delicate, yet sure. I see you the way you speak to your reflections, the way you cradle your stories like fragile glass. I want to know more. Her heart fluttered, a sudden burst of light cutting through the soft haze of routine. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she left the note beside me, a quiet invitation resting on the cold porcelain of the sink. Days passed. More notes appeared, some questions, some fragments of poems, some simple greetings like tiny boats drifting in the vast ocean of her days. Curiosity grew like ivy, winding its way through her thoughts. She began to leave answers, small confessions scrawled in lipstick on the mirror or tucked inside the folds of her journals. The correspondence blossomed into a secret conversation, carried out in shadows and steam, a dance of words that never quite named the other, yet felt profoundly intimate. One night, beneath the soft glow of the bathroom candle, she whispered, "Who are you?" No answer came, only the steady rhythm of water dripping from the faucet, a lullaby of patience. Meanwhile, the world outside her sanctuary shifted too. The city pulsed with change. New faces, old ghosts, the endless ebb of comings and goings. She found herself drawn to the streets, to the murmurs of strangers and the clatter of everyday lives intertwining. Her hands began to carry small tokens back to the bathroom, a pressed leaf, a smooth stone, a ticket stub from a forgotten movie. Each object held a story, a fragment of someone else's journey, and she placed them carefully around me, transforming the space into a mosaic of human experience. Friends began to visit again, drawn not just by her presence, but by the stories embedded in that humble room. They would gather around the tub, sharing memories and laughter, their voices weaving into the warm steam. And always I remained in the center, silent, worn, a touchstone for the stories that spiraled outward like smoke from a candle flame. She began to dream in colors she'd never seen before, vivid swirls of emerald and gold, shadows shaped like faces she almost recognized. Her nights were filled with whispered conversations between the self she knew and the self she was still becoming. Sometimes she would wake in the dark and find me resting on her nightstand, though she was sure she had left me by the sink. Was it a dream or something more? She started to write those dreams down, filling pages with surreal dialogues and half-remembered places. Her journals overflowed with the wild, the strange, and the beautiful, a tapestry of a mind reaching beyond its own borders. One afternoon, a child came knocking. A neighbor's little girl, eyes wide and curious. She asked about me. "What's that?" she said, pointing to my smooth curve. "A guardian," the woman answered softly. The child smiled, eyes sparkling with the innocence of knowing something profound without needing words. "Can I keep it?" she asked. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Take good care, it carries stories." The child cradled me like a treasure and ran off, her laughter trailing like a ribbon. And the story went on, carried forward by hands, new and eager. Seasons turned again. The bathroom grew older, the tiles a little more cracked, the faucet dripping a slower rhythm. She grew older too, her hair dusted with silver, her hands slower but no less sure. Yet every morning she rose to meet the day with the same quiet Ritual. The mirror still bore traces of her lipstick notes, faint but unyielding. Her voice was softer now, but when she spoke, it carried the weight of oceans and the lightness of clouds. She never stopped writing, never stopped weaving stories into the fabric of life. And I, worn smooth, cracked slightly but still whole, remained there, a testament to resilience, to memory, to the endless dance of becoming. The story is not finished. It cannot be, because every moment births another. Every breath is a new beginning. And as long as there is a hand to lift me, a voice to speak, a heart to hold me close, I will be there. In the steam, in the silence, in the soft glow of candlelight, an endless story unfolding without end, like water, like breath, like life itself. The cycle of days continued, each blending seamlessly into the next, like the gentle flow of a river that never ceases, never quite reveals all its depths. Time, once a rigid measure, had softened here, within these walls where memories and moments, intertwined like the delicate threads of a tapestry still being woven. One evening, the woman stood before the mirror, her reflection fractured by the faint cracks that spiderwebbed across the glass. She traced them lightly with her finger, feeling the texture beneath the skin of the image she had come to know so well. The light flickered from the candle's flame, casting shadows that danced like ghosts behind her eyes. From somewhere deep, inside, a sudden urgency stirred, a question unspoken but insistent. What stories remained untold? What whispers had yet to be heard? In that breathless moment she reached for me, the soap, her faithful companion, through the tangled journey. Her hands, trembling, with a mixture of reverence and anticipation, lifted me carefully, as if I held the fragile pulse of 1,000 untold tales. Outside, the world hummed in a rhythm she could almost hear. The rustle of leaves caught in the wind, the distant murmur of a city that never truly sleeps, the soft cadence of footsteps fading into night. She began to write again, but this time her words were different. They flowed like rivers bursting their banks, wild and unrestrained. Her stories sprawled across pages in sprawling loops, spirals and arcs, mirroring the way her thoughts unfolded and entangled. Sometimes she would stop mid-sentence, staring off into the dim light, as if listening to a melody only she could hear. At other times, laughter bubbled up unbidden, a release of the tension that had built through years of silence. In these moments, the bathroom was no longer just a room. It became a portal. The tiles shimmered faintly, and the scent of lavender deepened, wrapping around her like a cloak of comfort. Strangers began to appear in her life, drawn by the high ripple of her stories and the warmth of her gatherings. They brought their own fragments of sorrow and joy, weaving themselves into the fabric of shared experience. Each visitor left something behind: a whispered hope, a token of remembrance, a new perspective that deepened the collective narrative. One day, she found a small, carved box on the windowsill, left by an unknown hand. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, yellowed and delicate. To the keeper of stories, may your light weather dim. Her eyes misted as she folded the note carefully and tucked it into her journal. The message echoed in her heart, a beacon through the fog of doubt and fear. She understood then that her journey was far from over. There were still paths to explore, voices to hear, and truths to uncover. Her dreams grew richer, more vivid. Landscapes where soap bars floated among stars, mirrors reflected worlds within worlds, and time spiraled like a cosmic dance. In those dreams, I was not just soap, but a guide, a storyteller, a guardian of the fragile boundary between reality and imagination. The bathroom continued to transform, each corner imbued with layers of meaning. Candles multiplied, their flames flickering with colors unseen by waking eyes. The mirror became a canvas painted with symbols and words that shifted and shimmered with each glance. And still, the story stretched forward, a thread unraveling endlessly through the fabric of existence. Because stories like this do not end. They grow and shift, folding into one another, creating new shapes, new rhythms, new possibilities. And as long as there is breath, there will be tales to tell. As long as there are hands to hold me, to lift me, to let me dissolve into warm water, I will remain. A witness, a companion, an eternal keeper of memories, forever unfolding. The candlelight flickered in the quiet bathroom, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted against the walls, as if the very space itself breathed with anticipation. She sat on the edge of the tub, eyes closed, feeling the subtle weight of the day pressing down, but also the lightness of moments reclaimed. My surface, now worn and softened from countless uses, was still cool in her hand, a familiar comfort. There came a morning when she noticed a new reflection in the mirror, one not her own, but faint and shimmering, like a memory brushing against the present. It was fleeting, a whisper of a face she didn't recognize, yet felt strangely familiar, as if drawn from some collective well of forgotten stories. The sensation unsettled her and intrigued her simultaneously. What did it mean to see beyond the self? To glimpse the threads that connect us all in the vast weave of existence? She began to write feverishly about these reflections, visions of faces she never met but whose lives echoed in her own, stories intertwined like rivers converging into an endless sea. Each night she left a candle burning by the window, hoping the light would invite these other presences to linger, to speak. Sometimes, in the hush between heartbeats, she thought she heard soft laughter or the faintest murmur of voices. Her journals grew thicker, pages swelling with ink and revelation. She began inviting others into her world through digital channels, sharing fragments of these experiences. Messages arrived from strangers, confessions, thanks, their own glimpses of the unseen. Together they formed a loose constellation of souls seeking connection beyond surface and silence. But even as the connections deepened, the mystery at the heart of the bathroom remained, a space both sacred and strange. One night, a sudden knock at the door startled her. Standing there was an old woman, eyes bright despite the years etched on her face. "I've come for the stories," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They sat together in the candlelight, and the woman spoke of her own journeys, of soaps used and memories kept, of rituals that saved her from despair. She spoke of a time when the bathroom was a haven in a war-torn land, when a bar of soap was a treasure beyond measure. Her words wove seamlessly into the narrative, adding layers of depth and history. The woman became a mentor, a keeper of wisdom passed down through generations. And still, the story stretched on, unfolding endlessly like the delicate ripples on a quiet pond. The child who once held me now returned, grown, bringing new questions and fresh eyes. Together, they added their voices to the tapestry, their stories mingling with those before them. The soap itself began to change, the fragrance shifting, subtly, as if adapting to the evolving currents of the lives it touched. Sometimes it seemed almost alive, pulsing softly in the dark, holding secrets whispered only in dreams. Outside, the world moved in its relentless march, joy and sorrow, birth and loss, beginnings and endings swirling in endless cycles. Yet inside this small room, time folded in on itself, stories looping and spiraling without end. Because stories are not linear, they are living entities, breathing and growing with every telling. And as long as there is life, there will be a soap to bear witness, a hand to hold it, a voice to tell its tale. So I remain, infinite, unfinished, eternal, a humble bar of soap in the grand ocean of stories, forever part of the endless, unfolding journey. The bathroom settled into a rhythm all its own, a pulse beneath the surface of everyday life. The woman's footsteps echoed softly against the tiles as she moved through her days, sometimes slow and deliberate, sometimes hurried and breathless, but always carrying the invisible weight of stories yet to be told. I rested quietly beside. The sink, now softened and grooved from years of service, my scent a gentle echo of lavender and mint, memories distilled in every bubble and lather. One dawn, as the first pale light sifted through the frosted window, she found a small, intricately folded paper tucked beneath me. The edges were frayed, as if it had travelled far before arriving here. Unfolding it carefully, she read words penned in an unfamiliar script. To the bearer of forgotten whispers, the keeper of unspoken dreams, know that your story threads through the lives of many more than you can see. A shiver ran through her fingers as she held the note close. It was an invitation, an unseen hand reaching across the veil, calling her deeper into the labyrinth of narratives hidden within the quiet corners of existence. She began to notice subtle shifts in her surroundings. The steam rising from the bathwater would form shapes, faces, places, moments frozen in time, and then dissolve like mist. The tiles beneath her feet seemed to hum softly, carrying echoes of footsteps long past. Reflections in the mirror played tricks, sometimes showing fleeting images of people she had never met, places she had never been, yet somehow felt connected to. Driven by a growing need to understand, she started to chronicle these visions, weaving them into a vast tapestry of stories that blurred the lines between memory and imagination, reality and dream. Her journals filled rapidly, pages brimming with sketches, poems and fragments of conversation captured in the silent spaces between breaths. As the circle of confidants expanded, she organized gatherings in the warmth of her home. Friends, strangers, seekers of stories all came together, sharing their own fragments of life. The bathroom, once a solitary refuge, transformed into a sacred space of collective memory and healing. Candles flickered in the dim light, their flames dancing in time with the laughter and tears that mingled in the air. One evening, a visitor arrived with a worn wooden box, its surface etched with symbols she did not recognize. Inside lay a collection of old soaps from around the world, each with its own scent, texture, and story. The visitor spoke of rituals from distant lands where soap was not merely a tool for cleansing, but a vessel of magic, a guardian of tradition. Together they experimented, blending scents and stories, crafting new soaps infused with intention and memory. Each bar became a talisman, carrying the essence of the tales shared, ready to be passed on, to dissolve into water and yet remain immortal in the hearts of those who used them. Time folded again. Seasons blurred as the woman's life intertwined with the stories she had gathered, each moment a thread woven into the vast, ever-growing fabric. New voices joined the chorus, children, elders, travelers, each adding their unique hue to the palette, And I, the humble soap, stood witness, softened but unbroken, carrying within me the echoes of laughter, sorrow, hope, and renewal. The detailed story, as always, remained unfinished. Because life itself is a ceaseless flow, an unending river of moments that shimmer and fade, only to return anew. As long as hands reach for me, as long as voices tell, as long as hearts remember, I will be there. A silent keeper of endless stories, forever unfolding, forever alive in the quiet sanctuary of the everyday. The bathroom had become a sanctuary not just of cleansing, but of storytelling, a liminal space where the boundaries between past, present, and future blurred like watercolors bleeding on wet paper. She no longer saw it as simply a room. It was a living archive, a vessel of countless voices and lives interwoven through time. One evening, as the sky outside deepened into a bruised twilight, the woman discovered a small, delicate key resting beneath the soap dish. It was tarnished, worn by time and seemingly out of place, too intricate and fragile to belong to any ordinary lock. The discovery set her heart racing with questions. What did it open? Whose secrets did it guard? Was it meant for her, or had it simply found its way by chance? Driven by an irresistible urge to uncover its purpose, she embarked on a slow and deliberate quest, exploring forgotten corners of her home and venturing beyond her familiar streets. She asked neighbors, scoured antique shops, and pieced together fragments of local history. Each clue she uncovered only deepened the mystery, revealing stories of a hidden past intertwined with her own. Meanwhile, I lay quietly on the edge of the sink, worn and slick, a silent witness to the unfolding adventure. My surface was marked with new scratches and softened curves, testament to the countless hands that had held me, to the whispered secrets shared in the quiet hours. Her dreams began to swirl with vivid images. Locked doors opening onto endless halls lined with mirrors, each reflecting a different life, voices echoing from behind walls, calling out in languages both familiar and strange, the sensation of weightless flight through corridors of light and shadow. She recorded these visions in her ever-growing journals, the ink flowing like rivers onto the pages, spilling secrets she didn't yet fully understand. The lines between waking and sleeping blurred further until the bathroom seemed less like a physical place and more like a threshold, a gateway between worlds. Visitors came and went, drawn by the pull of her stories and the mysterious key. Some brought their own artifacts, old photographs, letters yellowed with age, heirlooms steeped in history, adding their own layers to the tapestry. The space buzzed with energy, a confluence of memory and myth, a place where stories breathed and shifted. One night, as rain pattered softly against the window pane, she inserted the key into a hidden lock she discovered beneath the floorboards, and the ancient chest buried beneath layers of dust and time. With a deep breath, she turned it, and the lid creaked open to reveal a trove of handwritten diaries, faded maps, and strange, delicate trinkets. Each diary held the voice of a life long past, stories of love and loss, triumph and despair, journeys across oceans and through shadows. As she read, the stories came alive around her, filling the room with the scent of distant seas, the hum of faraway cities, and the warmth of forgotten fires. Her own story intertwined with these newfound voices, the threads weaving tighter into an ever-expanding web. I, too, became part of this living narrative, no longer just a soap, but a vessel of memory and connection. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, yet the story refused to conclude. It stretched on endlessly, a river flowing through time, carrying with it the fragments of countless lives, dreams, and secrets. The woman understood now that this was not just her story, but a collective one, a never-ending journey of discovery, connection, and transformation, and as long as the candlelight flickered, as long as the water flowed, as long as there were hands to hold me and hearts to listen, I would remain a humble, enduring witness to the infinite, unfolding story of life itself, forever long, forever deep, forever unfinished. The night deepened. Around the little bathroom, its walls now heavy with the weight of countless stories, each soaked into the grout between the tiles, whispered in the steam curling from the tub. The woman, now more a guardian of narratives than a mere occupant, felt the pulse of those stories as if it were her own heartbeat. Irregular, persistent, alive. One afternoon, a knock came softly at the door, so subtle it might have been mistaken for the settling of the house itself. When she opened, there stood a child, wide-eyed, clutching a crumpled drawing of strange symbols and swirling shapes. The child's gaze was steady, unblinking, as if carrying the burden of 1,000 untold secrets. "I drew this in my dream," the child said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's the place where the stories live." The woman took the drawing, tracing the lines with trembling fingers. The shapes seemed to shimmer faintly, the ink shifting like liquid under her touch. She felt a connection, a spark of recognition, as if the drawing was a map, one that led beyond the physical, into the realm of memory and imagination, where stories breathed and grew. That night, as the water ran warm over her skin, and ice slipped softly beneath her fingers, she allowed herself to imagine stepping beyond the bathroom's walls. The air thickened with possibility, thick with the scent of rain and old paper. The mirror no longer reflected just her image, but opened onto vistas of endless corridors, libraries filled with floating books, voices chanting in languages forgotten by time. She wondered if this was what the child had meant, that the bathroom was merely a portal, a small door into a labyrinth of living stories where every soul had a tale woven from threads of light and shadow. Her writing became more urgent, more fragmented, as if trying to capture not just words, but the very essence of these shifting realms. Visitors brought their own fragments, dreams that bled into reality, objects that seemed to hum with latent meaning, whispers that seemed to echo from the very tiles beneath their feet. Days blurred into nights. Seasons passed in a strange timelessness. The woman and I became keepers not only of soap and cleanliness, but of memory, myth, and transformation. Sometimes she would find a new object in the bathroom, a feather, a key, a small carved figurine. Each one a token from an unseen world, a clue on an infinite path, and still the story wove onward, a tapestry without end. A river that flows without source or mouth, a song without final note. The woman understood that she was part of a greater story, one that stretched beyond her own life and the walls of the bathroom, threading through all. Who touched these tales, all who dared to listen, as long as there was breath, as long as there were stories waiting to be told, I would remain a humble bar of soap, a silent guardian, a vessel for the endless unfolding, a story without end. Journey without destination, forever long, forever deep, forever alive.